now might be a really good time for you to get angry.
That's my secret, Captain. I'm always angry.
All the choppers!
The MCU doesn't get the Hulk. Or at least, not anymore. Let me explain. So the Hulk first appeared in Marvel Comics in 1962 in the aptly titled Incredible Hulk #1. Creators Stan Lee and Jack Kirby set their ambitions high with this one. Bruce Banner's alter ego was a combination of Frankenstein, Quasimodo, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and a little bit of the Thing sprinkled in there for good measure. And when all those things combined, they gave us quite possibly one of the greatest comic book characters of all time. The Hulk was such a massive overnight hit that he was bound to spread past the pages of a comic book any day now. And only a few short years after his initial inception, an animated TV series began revolving around the character. But it wasn't until all the way in 1977 when the Hulk finally made his big break. At a time where mainstream superhero media was practically non-existent outside of Superman, The Incredible Hulk starring Bill Bixby and Lou Ferrigno graced television screens and brought the insane stories of Bruce Banner to a far greater audience than ever before. The show ran for 5 seasons in 6 years, which was an incredible feat for any TV show at the time, and it capped off with a few straight-to-television movies which, well, they varied in quality, but I don't know, they're kind of fun in their own way. But as you probably noticed by now, the Hulk has yet to appear on the big screen, and that all changed in 2003 with Ang Lee's Hulk, and to say this film was controversial would be an understatement. While it's honestly not even that bad of a movie on its own, it's certainly not a great Hulk movie. Especially not for all the fans that have been waiting decades for the Jade Giant to finally appear on the big screen. From the weird Shrek Hulk design to the boring and repetitive script with no payoff, there's definitely a lot to dislike. But there are definitely a few nuggets of gold in there, like with the casting of Eric Bana as Bruce Banner for example. But nonetheless, Hulk only made $245 million at the box office with a budget of $140 million, which put a big stop on us ever seeing Eric Bana come back for a sequel. However, it wasn't a big enough flop for Hollywood to give up on a Hulk movie entirely, and thus, only 5 years later, The Incredible Hulk was released into theaters. And once again, wasn't the smash hit people were expecting. The Incredible Hulk had pretty much the same exact budget and eventual box office results as Hulk 2003, which, as we already discussed, not great. This is a weird one though. You see, most people probably don't even know this since it was so long ago, but The Incredible Hulk was the second movie in the MCU. But I mean, you take out the Iron Man post-credit scene and the brief Super Soldier mention and you'd fool anyone to believing it wasn't. There's also the fact that Edward Norton played Bruce here, while he was eventually replaced by Mark Ruffalo in all subsequent films in the MCU, due to Norton being difficult to work with. But I mean, if you look into it, it really just seems like the guy wanted to make the movie more Ang Lee's Hulk, with an introspective theme and a slower pace, but the studio decided that Lee's film failed because of these reasons, which I mean, was definitely true. But with The Incredible Hulk, they made the movie much shorter, much simpler, and much more basic. While it's definitely still the better of the two, particularly in the action, any scene where the Hulk isn't just kind of beating the shit out of something just kind of falls flat, leading to the film's all but removal from the public conscience to general audiences, even though it was a foundation for the biggest film franchise of all time. And up until this point, that's been it for the Hulk. While there have been countless animated shows and made-for-TV movies featuring or revolving around the character, there hasn't been a theatrically released Hulk film since 2008. That wasn't the last time he ever showed up on the big screen though. Nope, even though Hulk has had to share his spotlight with his fellow heroes since then, we're only getting started. Thankfully, this story starts in a good way. You see, while his MCU debut wasn't anything to really write home about, his next 2 appearances are where the Hulk definitely hit his peak. Like I already mentioned, Bruce is played by Mark Ruffalo here, even though he's portrayed by Edward Norton in the film prior, which would be a lot more distracting if Ruffalo didn't knock it out of the park with this role. While it's definitely not the most comic accurate portrayal of all time, you can tell Ruffalo puts his all into the role and undeniably gives a near perfect performance as Bruce Banner. And there's 3 deceptively simple ways in which he does this. These first 2 Avengers movies are pretty much the only time that Bruce actually feels smart in his films. He's not even initially brought onto the team due to his powers, but instead just his brain. And all of his banter with Stark is so nerdy and over the top that it really shows you that he's on the same level of intellect as Iron Man. I'm also pretty sure in the comics Bruce is, I want to say, the 5th or 6th smartest character in Marvel. So it's good to see these movies actually show that, and show that he's not just the big strong guy. He also plays a fundamental part in bringing Vision and Ultron to life, so I mean, if that doesn't convince you that the dude's smart in these movies, I just don't know what will. Bruce is scary here. While not as intimidating as his counterpart obviously, you can tell he's still a force to be reckoned with. Banner knows how strong he can actually be, and almost uses that as an advantage in conversation. He's got a primed nuclear bomb and his finger is constantly on the trigger. While of course physically he's the least powerful in the team, his overall mad scientist levels of intellect and his reluctant acceptance of his powers leave him feeling so interesting that you don't even really care that it isn't the Hulk on screen. But at the end of the day, probably my favorite part about Ruffalo's version of the character is his fear. You can visually sense the terror that he understandably feels. At any moment he could uncontrollably become a gigantic monster with no conscience that will destroy anything in sight. Of course he'd be terrified. All the other actors who have played the character have had some aspect of this in some way or another, but none more so than Ruffalo. I mean, just look at the scene in Age of Ultron, man. It gives the character so much nuance and sets him apart from all of his contemporaries. And that's just with Banner. The Hulk is pretty much at his most powerful here. His intro into the final battle in the first Avengers perfectly demonstrates that. But there's also a bit of a softer side to the Hulk that you specifically get to see in Age of Ultron that gives the character layers, I guess you could say. Tie it back into the Shrek thing. He has complete remorse and knowledge over everything that he's done in his life. He just can't help who he is, or I guess more specifically, what he is. And now, Joss Whedon might not be the best person on the planet. I don't really know, I haven't looked into it at all, so don't quote me on that stuff. But goddamn can he write the Hulk well. And I mean, it showed too. Hulk was most people's, myself included, standout character in the Avengers. Hulk was such a big star in fact that Age of Ultron was practically marketed around his fight with the Hulkbuster. And then with that movie ending the way that it did, with the Hulk leaving the team in search of self-reflection and peace, you'd think a perfect solo Hulk film dealing with all that was right around the corner. Well, not exactly. It's all downhill from here. Yeah, Bruce Banner wouldn't appear on screen again for 5 years, and it would be as a side character in Thor's 3rd movie? Okay. And it would be loosely focusing on the Hulk's arguably biggest and most iconic storyline, but from Thor's perspective. Okay, there's no way that this turned out good, right? Well, surprisingly, it's honestly not that bad. Now, the movie itself, I've said it before, it's incredible and one of my favorites from the MCU. But as for the Hulk stuff, well, there is a lot that they did get right, but there's a lot that they didn't as well. So Hulk has a higher brain function here, and therefore has gained the intelligence of a 2-year-old. But the thing is, he's just more sassy than angry. It doesn't even really make sense since he's only meant to be in Hulk mode when he's angry. And I know there's the whole I'm always angry thing, but he just comes off as more annoyed than anything, which is weird. He's also a lot funnier here, and I mean a lot of the jokes do land. It's just weird to see the character acting like this when there's pretty much no hint to this side of him in any of the other movies that he's shown up in. But to be fair, Taika does know when to take him seriously. The scene in the Quinjet where Hulk and Banner are fighting for top spot once Bruce is reminded of his humanity is great. It also marks the last time you see his transformation in the MCU, which, not great. I don't know, I think Ragnarok's depiction of the character could have been a lot worse. They give the Hulk plenty of badass scenes and funny moments, but with that being said, it does sort of lean into the less intimidating, more comedy-based depiction of the character that is soon to become a big problem. I also definitely think Hulk should have won at least his first battle with Thor, but whatever. Let's just get this over with. Infinity War is probably my favorite MCU movie that's came out. Funny enough, it's got the worst depiction of my favorite character yet. But this one's gonna be short because I mean, there just isn't a whole lot to go off of here. Hulk shows up for about 5 seconds in the very beginning of the movie, just to be a punching bag to Thanos. And he gets his ass beat so bad that he literally gets kicked out of the entire franchise. It's so fucking disrespectful, dog. I don't know who the hell thought this was a good idea. It is cool to see Banner back on Earth after so long, even if his reintroduction with the team is kind of just glossed over. And that's the main issue here. Hulk was more of an afterthought in this movie, and even though more of the focus is on Banner, he doesn't really fare that well either. I just don't get why Hulk was such a bitch here. I feel like he got beat up way worse than this before, but even that aspect of it could have been redeemed if they just kept in that alternate ending where Hulk busts out of the Hulkbuster at the last minute. Cause throughout this entire film, there isn't a wow moment with the character. Hulk doesn't do anything very memorable or even impactful to the story. He's just kinda there. Now, I love Avengers Endgame, and I think it's a pretty perfect ending for so many characters. Hulk is not one of those characters. Now, I think this is going to be my most controversial take because I actually really like Smart Hulk. Yeah, not what you were expecting, huh? Well, let me explain. I think a lot of people had issue with him becoming more funny and taking a more jokey route, but I think it does make sense from a story perspective. Bruce always had that goofy, sort of awkward sense of humor. It was mainly just shrouded by his insecurities and fear of the Hulk. But now that he doesn't need to fear or worry about him, he can really just be himself. I'm not just gonna sit here and completely absolve the character though. There are for sure some things that I didn't like. Like for instance, I'm still pissed off that they didn't give Hulk any type of confrontation with Thanos. I mean, Thanos beating him up was pretty much how his whole shitty character arc was started in these last two movies. And from what I can tell, he doesn't even land a single punch on him. Like how sick would it have been if Hulk rolled out with the other big three for a 4-on-1 battle with Thanos? Or even if you didn't want to do that, have Smart Hulk start beating on Thanos at some point in the final battle. Until maybe you actually start to see the real Hulk start to show through the cracks, and show the audience that actual Hulk is still deep inside of Smart Hulk's body. Or even if you don't want to do that, if you don't want to try it all with the character, at least give him one hit. Have him go up to Thanos and give Banner some cringy one-liner that only he would think was cool, and have him, I don't know, fucking uppercut Thanos into the stratosphere or something. I don't know, just give him something. And, I mean, they did kind of try to fix this by giving him the snap at the end of the movie, but, and correct me if I'm wrong here, that just didn't feel like a Hulk thing. Like, I know they had the whole gamma radiation, so he's the only one element to it or whatever, but nothing about it felt Hulk-like to me, if that makes any sense. It almost felt like an excuse to weaken him before the final battle, so they didn't have to think of any actual Hulk stuff for him to do. Which, let me just remind you, fans literally only want to see him punch stuff in the face, so. But again, that is a pretty cool scene. Like, that moment alone is cooler than anything that he does in Infinity War. Well, now that I've said all that, let me rephrase my thoughts on Smart Hulk. As a character, I really like him. But from a story point of view, they once again just did not use him correctly. But that's not where my critiques end. Oh no.
Epilogue.
You see, there's one very specific element about Smart Hulk that just pisses me off more than anything else, and is pretty much what ruined the MCU's take on the character for me. And that's the fact that it didn't feel earned. Like I said, I do like the character change, but I just can't make myself invested because there was no real reason for it to happen. Like, I think he's a super fun character and it's a really interesting idea to put into a movie. But up until this point, we'd only seen brief glimpses of how great the character can really be. So having him do a complete 180 out of nowhere is just insane. Especially considering we never even got to fully invest in the original Hulk due to his spotty appearances and just lack of screen time overall. Here, think about it this way. Hulk has shown up in only 4 movies before this point, and none of them were his own stories. I'm sorry, but I won't be counting the Incredible Hulk in this, even though I know it's MCU, it's just so fucking disconnected from everything else that it wouldn't make any sense for what I'm gonna say here, so sorry to all the Incredible Hulk fans. Hell, Hulk himself only shows up for 20 seconds in Infinity War. And I just think that the MCU looked at the failures of the past Hulk movies, and were too scared to try again, which is understandable, but you have to think about it like, the MCU is one of the most established and fully formed franchises of all time. So the fact that a character, and not just any character, but one of their biggest and most beloved characters of all time, feels like he was basically tossed to the side and forgotten about is just sad to see. And I know the whole Universal owning the rights thing is a pain in the ass, but I mean, come on, you're Disney. I'm sure you can work something out. I mean, you did it with Spider-Man. And I know you can do it with the Hulk. And do it well too. I mean, the best live action Hulk stuff ever has been under your name. But sadly, the future doesn't look like it'll get any better. He's gonna be thrown into She-Hulk, but from the looks of it, it just kinda seems like Marvel's gonna make him the butt of the joke again, and basically treat him as a pawn to show why She-Hulk is superior, which is just gross. Hopefully I'm wrong. I mean, at the time of me recording this, the show isn't even out yet, but I mean, I just wouldn't put him past him at this point. However, there is a little bit of good news. You see, your boy Colt45 has this whole issue figured out. I've came up with a foolproof plan on how to fix the Hulk, but I'm gonna save that for a different video, so make sure to subscribe. And I mean, if you made it this far, leave a like and let me know your thoughts on the state of the character. I personally am just sad to see it happen the way that it's happened. But with all that being said, thank you for watching. I've been Colt45. See you next time.